Buckle up, a history of automotive atrocities. These days we expect our cars to, not explode upon impact. Ah, the Ford Pinto, a car that has gone down in history for all the wrong reasons. A car so dangerous it makes a clown car look like a Volvo. Yes, you heard that right. The Pinto was infamous for its safety issues, or rather, the lack thereof. Back in the 70s, Ford rushed the Pinto into production to compete with Japanese imports. The competition was fierce, and Ford was desperate to capture the market. They wanted a small, affordable car that could rival the likes of Toyota and Honda. The result? A car with a gas tank positioned so poorly that even a minor fender bender could turn it into a fiery inferno. The gas tank was located just behind the rear bumper, making it extremely vulnerable in rear-end collisions. And the worst part? Ford knew. They were fully aware of the design flaw. They had internal memos, crash test results, and engineers begging them to fix it. The engineers had conducted numerous tests and had documented the risks extensively. But Ford did some cold, heartless math and decided it was cheaper to pay out lawsuits than to recall and fix the gas tanks. They calculated the cost of potential lawsuits versus the cost of a recall and chose the cheaper option. Eventually, after a public outcry, Ford issued a recall. The public was outraged, and the media coverage was relentless. But not before hundreds of people were injured or killed in Pinto infernos. The damage was done, and the Pinto's reputation was irreparably tarnished. The Pinto became a textbook example of corporate negligence. It was studied in business schools and legal courses as a cautionary tale of what happens when profit is prioritized over human lives. Let's be clear. Any car that spontaneously attempts to murder you is a bad car. It's not just a bad car, it's a death trap on wheels, a mechanical menace that should be avoided at all costs. In 1971, General Motors had a 6.7 million vehicle oops moment. This wasn't just a minor recall, it was a colossal blunder that affected millions of drivers. Chevrolet models had a problem with their engine mounts breaking. These weren't just any models. They were some of the most popular cars on the road at the time. When these mounts broke, parts from the transmission would sometimes sever brake lines or jam the accelerator. This meant that drivers could suddenly find themselves unable to stop, or worse, accelerating uncontrollably. Imagine cruising down the road when suddenly your car decides it's had enough of this stopping nonsense. You're pressing the brake pedal, but nothing happens. Instead, the car speeds up, turning a peaceful drive into a terrifying ordeal. Your brakes disappear, and you're now in a high-speed game of automotive chicken. Every second feels like an eternity as you desperately try to regain control. It's enough to make you want to walk everywhere. After an experience like that, who wouldn't consider ditching their car for good, or, buy a bicycle? At least with a bike, you have more control and fewer chances of catastrophic mechanical failure, just maybe not a Schwinn because they were owned by GM at the time. So even your bike might have a bit of that GM curse. You'd think that after the exploding Pinto debacle, Ford would have learned a thing or two. But no, this time, the culprit was a faulty gear shift. This gear shift had a habit of spontaneously shifting the car into reverse. Imagine pulling up to a stoplight, only to have your car suddenly decide it wants to play bumper cars. This rogue gear shift was linked to over 130 deaths. Instead of issuing a full recall, Ford sent out a warning flyer. A flyer! Like a takeout menu for death traps. Needless to say, people were outraged. It was a PR nightmare. A masterclass in how to make a bad situation infinitely worse. Chapter 4. Ford. This time, it's electric. Boogaloo. By the mid-90s, Ford was still playing fast and loose with safety regulations. This time the issue was an electrical system with a pyromaniac streak. The ignition switch in nearly 8 million Ford vehicles had a tendency to overheat, turning cars into four-wheeled bonfires. Ford eventually issued a recall, but not before a lot of people had their faith in built Ford tough shaken. Thankfully no one died, but there were plenty of singed eyebrows and charred garages. Chapter 5. Toyota, Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift Edition. In 2010, Toyota owners reported their vehicles accelerating uncontrollably. Toyota initially blamed driver error and floor mats, but eventually, they admitted to a mechanical defect in the electronic throttle control system. The fallout was massive. Toyota paid $1.2 billion in fines. It was a PR nightmare that tarnished their reputation for reliability. Toyota's response was slow and inadequate, leading to a loss of consumer trust. The incident highlighted the importance of corporate accountability. Even reliable brands can have serious flaws, and sometimes the truth is dirtier than you could ever imagine. Chapter 6: Ford and Firestone, a match made in automotive hell. In the early 2000s, the Ford Explorer had a penchant for spontaneous tire explosions. Over 200 deaths and thousands of injuries were linked to these tire failures. Instead of working together, Ford and Firestone engaged in a public blame game. Ford blamed Firestone for faulty tires, while Firestone blamed the Explorer's design. The partnership dissolved, leaving a trail of lawsuits and investigations. It was a corporate brawl for the ages. Neither side accepted responsibility for the carnage. The incident highlighted the dangers of corporate negligence and the importance of rigorous safety standards. Chapter 7: Takata Airbags, the exploding safety feature. Takata airbags, instead of being life-saving pillows, were more like claymore mines. The airbag inflators had a tendency to explode, sending metal shards flying at occupants. The fallout was staggering. At least 20 deaths, hundreds of injuries, and millions of vehicles recalled. It's a sobering reminder that even safety features can be dangerous, and the importance of rigorous testing and accountability. Chapter 8: GM, the ignition switch cover-up. For owners of nearly 3 million GM vehicles, turning the ignition switch became a game of automotive Russian roulette. A faulty ignition switch could shut off the engine and disable critical safety systems. GM knew about the problem for over a decade but covered it up. It wasn't until 2014, after 124 deaths, that GM issued a recall and offered an apology. It was a masterclass in corporate negligence, a textbook example of how not to handle a safety crisis, and a reminder of the importance of transparency and accountability. Chapter 9: Volkswagen Dieselgate, faking it, German engineering style. In 2015, Volkswagen committed one of the biggest acts of corporate fraud in automotive history. The scandal, which came to be known as Dieselgate, shook the very foundations of the automotive industry and left a lasting impact on how emissions regulations are enforced. They equipped over 11 million diesel vehicles with software designed to cheat emissions tests. This software, known as a defeat device, could detect when the car was undergoing an emissions test and temporarily reduce emissions to pass the test. However, under normal driving conditions, these cars emitted pollutants at levels up to 40 times the legal limit. This not only violated environmental laws but also posed serious health risks to the public. The fallout was swift and brutal. Billions in fines, the CEO resigned, and their reputation lay in tatters. Volkswagen faced lawsuits from governments, environmental groups, and consumers, leading to a financial and public relations nightmare. It was a stunning act of deception. The scale and audacity of the fraud left many in disbelief, as Volkswagen had long been seen as a symbol of reliability and engineering excellence, a betrayal of public trust on a massive scale. Consumers felt duped, and the scandal sparked widespread outrage and protests, with many calling for stricter regulations and greater transparency in the automotive industry. The incident highlighted the dark side of corporate greed. It showed how far a company might go to protect its market share and profits, even at the expense of the environment and public health, and the importance of rigorous oversight and accountability. The scandal prompted regulatory agencies worldwide to reevaluate their testing procedures and enforcement mechanisms to prevent such fraud in the future. Even the most trusted brands can have a dark side. The Dieselgate scandal serves as a stark reminder that vigilance and integrity are crucial in maintaining public trust and safeguarding the environment. Chapter 10: Fiat Chrysler, hacking into your car and your life. In 2015, security researchers demonstrated a flaw in Fiat Chrysler's Uconnect system. They were able to remotely hack into a Jeep Cherokee, taking control of the vehicle's steering, brakes, and transmission. It was a chilling demonstration of the potential dangers of internet-connected cars. Fiat Chrysler issued a recall and a software patch to fix the vulnerability. But the incident raised unsettling questions about the security of our increasingly connected vehicles. As cars become more reliant on software, the potential for cyber attacks grows, and the importance of cybersecurity in the automotive industry cannot be overstated. Outrow the road ahead, driving into an uncertain future. Stay informed, drive safely, and maybe invest in a good bicycle helmet just in case.